From that moment, you're becoming like a storyteller, and that's the greatest part of it, is the characters that you're creating, and you're creating that world again. So tell it, and tell a lot of people, because otherwise it's just going to be in your brain, and you're going to be the only one that has that, which is fine. Some people like to keep it to themselves, but I like to share it.
Okay, we're getting close to the time where we're going to leave, let people buy books and sign them. We probably have time for one or two more questions if anybody has one. Okay, there's one in front and there's one off to the side there. Let's take one in front first.
First of all, is everybody from DC or the DC, Maryland, Virginia area? I wanted to ask if you thought about the benefits of doing comics in DC. I think primarily most people think of New York, maybe a little bit, I guess, now Los Angeles, to do comics. But like, are there benefits for doing them in Washington, DC, Maryland, Virginia?
Like tax benefits? I don't think so, especially in this day and age when so much is driven by the web, commerce, communications. It's all web-based. I think the reason New York is considered one of the hubs is because it's a huge metropolitan city. You have all the different types of folks. And DC is a very transient city, so it's kind of good and bad. But there are other places that are kind of considered comics hubs that I think just kind of happened by accident. Portland, Oregon. I mean, people moved there because it was cheap to live there. So all the cartoonists from San Francisco went up the coast and lived in Portland. Now it's too expensive to live in Portland. That said, even in this room, I know a lot of cartoonists in this room, and the different styles and mediums that they use, whether it's web comics, whether it's mini comics, whether they're publishers, whether they're artists. That's kind of one of the themes that we're trying to convey in the panel was, this is a really good area in terms of meeting up with other cartoonists and kind of developing a scene.
Also, the DC area, like I mentioned, we have Small Press Expo that's pretty much right down the street. Baltimore Comic-Con is also close by. So we do have a couple, and then DC Comic-Con just got started up, and I'm sure there's a lot of other smaller venues where you can sell your work at, so that's becoming prominent. And then again with DC Conspiracy, they're holding a lot of events like the Counterculture Festival, which was just like, I guess, last month. And also with DC Conspiracy putting out Magic Bullet, the comics newspaper in DC, I think, even though they've only done just issue 1, and I know Rafe Roberts was really big on getting that out, I think we're taking footsteps to become a more prominent city with comics. Definitely, I can notice within the past few years, recently, it's becoming a lot more prominent.
There's even like, if you want a great resource, you have to read Mike's blog in terms of what's going on in terms of the area of comics. It's wonderful. There's a new exhibit going up with some very prominent alternative comics in Arlington, right. And that's just great. We're kind of being seen as a place where you want to show your comics, and we have the cartoon library, the Library of Congress. Right. So there's a whole bunch of resources in the area.
And another thing to keep in mind too is the value of networking. Carolyn mentioned working as a graphic designer. A lot of the people that are in the middle of their career now and coming out with books like Nick Galifianakis or Richard Thompson, they all knew each other doing illustration work for USA Today when USA Today was starting up. And when you can put in a good word for one of your buddies who's a cartoonist, it pays off eventually. In fact, we have a cartoonist in the room who just got a contract from the Washington Post Writers Group. Donna in the back there. I have no idea how much being in Washington helped that or not.
I slept with everybody in Washington.
Oh, there you go. So sitting your way to the top. Okay, on that note, let's take
How do I follow that up? There's been in my opinion, a long-standing relationship between comic books and film. But it seems to me that in recent years, there's been a whole lot of new experimentation, filmmakers using comic book techniques in films. Not even just to translate a comic book, but just using those techniques in films. And I'm just wondering if we have an idea, an opinion of how influential those experimental techniques are being on filmmaking, because a lot of times some of these things really do change the way we do films.
For sure, definitely films have brought an audience to comics as well, because, I mean, let's look at like a lot of the major big popcorn movies from the past few summers are like Spider-Man, Batman, The Watchmen. It's like, it's overwhelming with Hollywood. Even from what I hear at San Diego Comic-Con, it's basically MovieCon. And in a way, like, is that affecting the comics industry? For good, for better, or for worse? We don't know yet, but I definitely think, hopefully, that if somebody has never read a comic before and watches like Batman Begins, and then they want to get into comics, then that's awesome. But on the other hand, like, I do feel like the Hollywood industry, basically, they think that a comic book can be a movie because they have similar styles to movie storyboarding. So when you look at how movies are made, yes, it's a panel by panel frame of them breaking down the movies, breaking down each scene, and they plan out their movie that way in pre-production. So yes, but that's not a comic book. Like, that's a method of them breaking down their story to film. So I think a lot of people get confused between storyboarding and comic books, and they are two separate things. But I can see, obviously how that affects each other. And I personally don't have an opinion on, a solid opinion on if it helps or hurts the industry. Because from what I hear, especially with San Diego Comic-Con, it's not really about comics anymore. And that's a whole nother discussion. But I like to think that movies help the comic industry.
Well, there's some directors like Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller, who's a comic book creator, who's kind of delved into making movies. And sometimes, the techniques work. I thought it worked in Sin City and 300, and sometimes they just stink, like The Spirit, which is awful. But lately, I think that Hollywood kind of dips into the comic well for story ideas. And I think that's been kind of influencing the way comics are being written, presented. Some people are just kind of looking at that as a quick jump to getting a movie deal if they can, rather than kind of thinking about the genre itself and its potential, focusing on what you're doing, rather than, I hope that this idea I have might be turned into a movie if I make a comic out of it. I've seen a lot of comics recently where they're essentially storyboards, kind of unfinished, very kind of I wouldn't even say unpolished. There's a difference between unprofessional looking and unpolished, and it just looks like it's a pitch for a story, and they're selling it as a comic book.
Right, and a lot of times they are just pitches for stories, for something Lock and Key or something like that. There's a company that used to be called Platinum that came out with comic books, but they were mostly pitches for movies or attempts to sell properties. The relationship actually goes back to the very beginning, to the 1890s, when mass production became possible for comic strips, and motion pictures also became popular. So some of the first short silent films are adaptations of comics. And it mostly intertwined through animation. People like Winsor McCay would do Little Nemo in Slumberland, and then a cartoon about the sinking of the Lusitania. It's just, I think now technology is making it easier to make you believe a man can fly. And people are more willing to accept that type of thing now because seeing is believing. So I'm not really sure how it's all going to play out. I'm sure everybody will get sick of it and we'll eventually go back to movies like The Deer Hunter and be depressed again. So unless anybody has anything they drastically want to ask, I think we'll wrap up. I suggest you guys go out and buy books at the counter out front and then bring them back and get people to sign them. And thank you all very much.
I'd like to thank Mike for moderating and the entire panel for sharing your craft, your art, and a genre that is familiar to some and new to others in the room tonight.